Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Our message today, Rabbi gave to us, I think in 57. I don't remember 57. Anyway, I wrote it down, but it was many years ago. And I I remember when he first talked about that, he said, there may be people who we never feel forgave us. And it wasn't that long ago that I experienced that myself. That I just didn't feel, as he said, feel forgiven. But then he always talked about self examination. Don't look to change other people, look to change ourselves. And that's a constant thing in me. I'm always self examining, always asking myself, should I do this? Should I do that? Did I do right? Did I do wrong? It's almost, it gets to a point where sometimes it feels almost like an obsession. But you know what? I think it's during those times of self examination and speaking to friends who are close to me and who I trust that the greatest change comes in us. And so when I asked myself, why didn't I ever feel forgiven by this person? I realized that I hadn't forgiven myself. And that's where I had to begin to truly, even though you think you forgive yourself, if the guilt doesn't go, then you really haven't forgiven yourself. If if I've learned from what I did and continue to take steps not to continue doing the same thing over and over, that's when I could say I have truly forgiven myself. Shabbat Shalom, Isabel. Have a good afternoon.
The whole speech was in the dark.
Pardon me, Brian?
The whole speech was in the dark when he was talking. There was no it was dark. This scene.
You couldn't see the rabbi?
He was like like the light went off in his room.
Oh,
I
really?
didn't see that.
I think it had to do with something on your computer, Brian, because the rest.
I couldn't make a light on the screen. You're sending it to me. It was like in a dark room. No light was on.
Uh-huh. Well, I don't know why, because I think you're the only one who saw that. But that's not the issue, Brian. The issue is about forgiving ourselves and forgiving others. And that's an issue that's extremely important because once we can feel forgiven, the past is there as a teacher, but then we can start again. Um, have you experienced anything like that, Miriam?
Oh, totally. Um, Also, we're not responsible so much. I mean, we want to receive it, but we're not responsible for another person who I remember somebody who used to come to the congregation used to say they didn't really forgive it for they didn't feel remorse or whatever. And yeah, sometimes that's true, but you're right that we have to be right with ourself and with God, because we cannot be responsible for another person, whether they feel remorse or not. That's their journey. And we have to be right with ourselves, even though it's hard when you feel that they haven't really forgiven you. But sometimes it's a journey. One thing I'm really realizing about what a journey means, like today, when I was feeling really cold, like at night, like not feeling well, but not feverish necessarily. I felt like my bones were cold. I just didn't feel well. I felt a bit nauseous, whatever. But when I get sick, it really brings up emotional stuff. I felt such fear, and I was talking to God. I say, when does this end completely? When does it end? Blah, 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 blah. And I've really been thinking, and then I start like, and I'm trying to say it's because I was so deeply involved in the occult, the blah, 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 blah. But it's not only that, or it's not that anymore. I've asked God to really change me, and I renounce that stuff. If there may be little things that I hang on to, well, I'm asking God, help me with this. But the journey is more than just like I have to look back and think, where was I on this journey before? And there's some things, like even reading, even though I have some trouble reading sometimes because of my breathing, but not really much, compared to the past, it's like unbelievable. And I'm starting to forget that. Things, God is changing me. Sometimes I say, like, I want God to speed up, because I go, what's going on? Like, and who do I, like, the journey isn't ended. That's really the main thing. It's not over yet. And if today I felt my bones were cold. I felt, I don't know, and scared a bit. And I said, God, where are you? And I don't know. I have to say that and let it go that wherever I am on my journey, I'm the type of person that things don't always happen fast. It's like I'm like Uranus, or what's the other planet, goes around very slow. And yet I can be really hyper. But I mean, it's a journey. It's really important, and to compare to where we were before. And
Exactly.
I'm really seeing that now. Not everything is the way I decide. Why aren't you doing this yet? Why aren't you doing? I mean, God wants us to call out to Him, but sometimes we just have to be patient.
Exactly. That's why these stories in the Torah are so powerful. It's like, he started off by saying, we don't need to take them all so literally. And I've said that. Whether they literally happened or not, we don't know. But we know that these stories give us a true moral example of how to live. So we shouldn't get caught up, in the letter, but the each stage is so vital, and at the end of the day, I think it's really important to just take some time and look at where we were before in comparison to where we are now, because we are on an upward journey when we walk with God. It's a downward journey, like a downward spiral, like the rabbi used to say, when we don't. But the past, these stories, like with Joseph, Joseph heard the things that his brothers had said. He knew that they were sorry for what they did. I don't know if they said that they were sorry. I can't remember in this moment, but I know they were each saying, "This is happening to us because of what we did." So in a way, they were acknowledging what they had done, and they knew that there are consequences. So when we do that, when we say, "Okay, these things are consequences either for what I did," sometimes they're consequences for what our parents did, or our grandparents, or even great grandparents. Remember the second commandment. Up, God will not forgive us, or I always forget the words. To those who reject me, he will not forget the iniquity in the second commandment. To the third and fourth generation, going back to my great grandparents, there were things that they did that I may be still suffering for today, but don't realize it. But then it says, and showing kindness, showing mercy to the thousandth generation, to those who love me. So here I am, three generations away. I'm the fourth generation after my great grandparents who lived in Kiev long time ago. I don't know if they followed God. If I look at my family and I see the lives that they led, I didn't see a witness of that, you know. So, but then God will allow now those kind of curses are broken in us because we love God, because God chose us and said, okay, this is the third and fourth generation is over. Now you can begin again. There's another thing that he said. How many of us have stopped our journey and have given up saying, there's nothing more for us? And I go through periods like that where I just feel stagnant, like nothing is happening in my life. Even though little things still continue to happen, sometimes I want them to be big things, and they haven't happened. And then all of a sudden, something tremendous will happen. I was feeling that yesterday. And this morning, believe it or not, it didn't happen to me, but the Alvarados, Yannette sent me this a video of what was happening in Venezuela, how President Trump came into this country, a country that has caused misery, that the president had caused misery to its people. And all of a sudden, overnight, it's been changed. And our lives are like that overnight. They're changed. And we don't always recognize it. So we have to stop and say, okay, what is God doing in my life? And that happened to me on Monday. I just want to tell you this little story because to me it was incredible. And I thought about it again when the Alvarados, who do a beautiful liturgical service, when they said with Esa Enai, when we sang the Shear Ma'alot, and you read, Miriam, God will not allow my foot to slip. Remember, you read that? He does not allow our foot to slip. On Monday, you remember last week I was suffering from very bad neck pain. And so I had an appointment on Monday with my chiropractor, who's wonderful. But I almost canceled it because the weather was so bad. It had rained and then it got cold and it was so icy. It was terrible. When I got to the chiropractor's office, there are two parking lots. One is a big one, and it was so filled with ice, I could not get out of my car. So I drove around to one that's just opposite the building, and this one was paid parking by the city. So I parked there and still had trouble getting out of my car, but because it was better than the other parking lot and I was close to the car next to me, there were cars all around me, I was able to hold on to it and walk very close, to the building where they had salted. So when I left, there was a man who I had met inside, an older man, and he had a cane, and he was standing at the bottom of the walkway, just like he wasn't moving. But before I left the building, I said that very line. I said, God, please do not allow my foot to slip. And these psalms are given to us to help us build our trust. And I prayed that, and then I thought, oh, it would be so good if I could just hold on to somebody so that I could get to my car. So I go down to the bottom and I see this man, and I said to him, do you need a lift? Are you okay? And he said, yes, yes, the Uber is coming. And then he said, it would be good for us I showed him where my car was, and he said, it would be good for us to just walk this way. And he took my arm, and I had asked God to help me to find somebody. And here it was this angel. He took my arm, and together we walked slowly to the edge of the driveway where I was able to cross the street. And then I hesitated. I turned around to him and I said, you're my angel. And then I hesitated because right outside the door of my car was so icy and there were no other cars around for me to hold on to. Suddenly, out of nowhere, around the corner, pulls this the city plow, spraying spraying salt on the ice. So I waved him down and I asked, s'il vous plaît, monsieur, please, could you please spray some salt on my car because I can't get into my car. I said it in French because, like the other gentleman, he was a Quebecois. And so he said, attends minute, wait a minute. And he pulled right next to my car where there was no other car. He sprayed the salt right next to me, and then he backed out and he waited to see if I was all right. And I went and I got into my car and I just bowed my head and just thanked God for another step along the way that helps me to trust him. Because when we learn that each step of our journey is to help us trust God, we become stronger and stronger and stronger in that trust, and we see how God provides in ways that we can't even begin to imagine. And I waved to my two angels, and I got into my car and I drove off, and it was just like, thank you, God, just thank you. So at the end of the day, of each day, it's important to stop and look at our journeys, to look at the stages, even the stage on that day, and to look back and say, God is with me. He's always been there and he will always be with me. And it's these stories in the Torah that help us in our lives to see, well, if he helped Joseph and he helped these brothers and he helped Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and I'm walking with him, why wouldn't he help me? And he does. That's the beauty of these stories. And let's see, what else did he say? I loved about when he said about our final destination is to be in God's presence. And this life is a journey, it's not the destination. When we get to the next destination, we'll know it. But God is preparing us in this life for the next and final stage of that journey when we are in his presence. And so when we see all these things that look so terrible that are happening in the world, look at them, say, okay, that's in God's hand. There's nothing I can do, nothing we can do. We can pray, but we can trust him. We can rely on him. We can live a righteous life. And then little by little, we'll watch how it's God's job to change the world, not us. All we can do is change ourselves. So it's a beautiful story. And when somebody dies, when somebody leaves, it's like he said, just imagine. And I remember when Rabbi left, I remembered his words. He said, remember, it's just a simple, I'll see you later. He's on vacation. He's gone on a long trip. And then one day we'll see him and we'll see all our loved ones. So we're on a continuum where we've like stepped into eternity once God opens our eyes and our hearts. It's absolutely, there is nothing that can compare to the stories in the Torah. Nothing can compare with what we can learn from any other human being except for these experiences that we see in God's Torah.
It's interesting though, the brothers, I mean, you could see Joseph had changed and he forgave them, but they never fully understood that.
No.
And sometimes,
Yeah.
you know, we don't understand how another person has changed, or even with ourselves, because they didn't know. They said just in case. They did all sorts of just in case.
Yeah.
It's so human in a way, like, you know, it's nice because they're just human beings.
Exactly. But they also didn't go through what Joseph did. Joseph was a true chosen one,
Right.
and he was tested right to the end. And each time he saw what God did with him, his brothers didn't have that opportunity. His brothers lived with guilt for
Yeah.
all those 17 years, 22 years. They lived, they never admitted to their father what they had done. And they had to live with that all those years. So it was much harder for them to feel forgiven.
Right.
Yeah, so it was a totally different thing. And and I went through a lot of years of feeling horrible for things that I had done in my past before I came to know God. So I understand what it is to not feel forgiven.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
that's our journey, is to forgive ourselves,
Right.
because what God what I meant for, I don't know if I ever meant it for bad. I don't think I ever did anything with the intention of doing something bad, but I did some wrong things. I made some big mistakes. But God used every one of them, and He brought me back to every place that needed healing and still does. Just like the journeys, if we're going to continue now in with Exodus, and then we're going to go to Numbers, and we're going to go to the journeys where Israel has to be brought back to every place that they sinned, every place where they complained and they went against their leader Moses, who God had chosen. Just like us, every place on our journey, we have an opportunity to forgive ourselves and to change and to grow. We're no longer that same person. And people who don't change, who always remain the same, don't understand that because they think you did too. But there's nothing we can do. People cannot see us. Only we can see what's going on inside. And even then, we can't see ourselves because that's why our rabbi used to say, always pray that Psalm 139, search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my thoughts. See if there's any wicked way within me, anything that goes against what you want for me, and lead me into your way. We were on one trajectory, on a path. All the paths that I was on before in the New Age led to dead ends. I was searching, and now there are no dead ends on this path. There may be short stops where we don't recognize why we're stuck, what we're going through, why we're going through it. And then all of a sudden, boom, God opens our eyes.
But
It's
just a one little thing. Um, when we start giving qualifications or descriptions to our past, like it's not like, well, your heart was good, not you, but one's heart was
right,
good and we didn't mean well. Let's say your heart wasn't good, one's heart
right,
wasn't good, or you were lashing out of your own pain. Or
right.
like I remember this woman who abused her child. And I told you this many years. She said for herself, she couldn't, it became so a strong impulse in her because of her own pain that was done to her. The only thing she could do was lock herself. Anyway, I don't know how she arranged it, but lock herself up during these times. She
Wow.
said she was so impassioned that she couldn't, but God's forgiveness will even go to her. It's when we change, even though she did an awful thing. I mean, there is a point, I think, where people cross the line. The Nazis crossed the line,
Right.
obviously. But remember Corrie ten Boom with the Nazis, she couldn't forgive him. But could you imagine what he had done? It's not only well your heart was in the right place. Maybe not one's heart, not
Right.
always. Sometimes you're lashing out of pain, you're
Yes,
reacting to something, whatever. But that's what God's forgiveness is, and that's why we have to forgive ourselves. Because if
exactly.
we know something we've done is really wrong, and we have to ask God to help us to forgive ourselves, doesn't make the thing right. It just makes the how we react to it. But that's
Exactly.
God's gift. If everything were we had a good heart, nobody would really. You know what I'm saying? It's
Yeah.
it's that's true too that you could have had a good heart, but sometimes wrongs are so terrible. How could God forgive somebody who's, let's say, been an alcoholic and wasn't there for their kids at all? My mother could never forgive herself, even though I wouldn't change her as a mother for anybody.
Right.
And I told her that. But sometimes it's really hard to forgive ourselves.
Right. Yeah, we can't leave out that aspect of God in our lives because otherwise everything we're capable of anything. And God said we he said at the Tower of Babel, he said, I'm going to go down and confound the languages because whatever they put their mind to do, they can do. So we can put our minds to doing anything we put our mind to do, we can do. But there comes a point, like I even felt it yesterday, that there was some battle, an internal battle that I had, and I just had to give it to God because I couldn't, with all my experience with the unconscious and doing hypnosis and psychology and all these things I'd been through, I couldn't lift it. There's nothing I could do. And this morning I woke up and I felt something had lifted. And it was like I remember when I was working for Brian Belanger during the at my DPM days, and he was not an easy man to work for. And I would sometimes come home crying. I was for a 2 week period. I was ready to quit. I was so upset. I just didn't know what to do. And then I remember reading in the New Testament. I read, "Be anxious for nothing, but in prayer and supplication, make your requests be made known to God, and the peace of God, which surpasses all human understanding, will guard your hearts and minds." And I prayed that night. I was weeping, and I prayed that prayer because I could not stand another minute in this job. And the next day I woke up, Miriam, I'm telling you, literally, there was a burden lifted off of my shoulders, off my heart. And I came into the office and I was just peaceful. And Brian walked in and he looked at me. And honestly, he said, "What happened to you?" And I went into his office, I sat down, and I told him exactly what I had done and what had happened. He knew that there was something more. He could see it because for 2 weeks I was a mess. And that's the beauty of, you see, God. The other thing is, I'm noticing God is not a sugar daddy. He doesn't, he does bless those, the good and the bad. He does pour out his rain on both. But then those who obey him, those who have a desire to follow him, who want to choose life in spite of all the struggles that we have. And we keep saying, "God, I want to choose you. Hineni, help me." There's a very big difference with that, because then he takes us an extra step further and he showers blessings on us that we never could have imagined. And that I've witnessed in my life time and again, over and over. And there is no, as Rabbi said, there is no end here. The journey doesn't end. And I love that. Our journey doesn't end. And we have to remind ourselves when we feel, "Oh God, I've done it now. I'll never be forgiven for this one." Or why am I stopping myself from doing more or doing better? Because I have that a lot. I always feel that no matter what, I could do better. I could do more. And, you know, yes, we can, but is that really what God wants from us? We have to stop and say, "I'm blessed with what I have. I know there can be more, but Lord, you lead the way. You be the shepherd. You open the doors. You clear the pathway for me." And then he does. It's a beautiful walk and nothing can replace it. No religion on earth can replace what we have in a relationship with our Creator. So if anybody else has something they want to add, speak now or forever hold your peace, or until next week anyway. All right. Well, I want to wish everybody a Shabbat Shalom. Miriam, take care of yourself, rest. I hope you are well. We pray for each and every one of us in this community, that our prayers would be answered, that we would grow and learn to love God more and more. And remember, one day we'll see all our loved ones again. So have a wonderful week. God bless you all. Shabbat
Shabbat
Shalom.
shalom.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat shalom.